classmates. Our behavior change replication is on goal setting and performance feedback to increase weekly running distance. The 5 participants in our replication were Alana Sperry, myself, Ebony Woods, Andrea Harris, Ive Ihige, and Gianna Gazzillo. According to research, obesity rates continue to rise year after year. For college students, evidence indicates that nearly 24.2% of students do not engage in moderate physical activity, and 41.4% do not engage in vigorous physical activity, which is referenced in bullet point 1. Unfortunately, the grim results continue as 56.7% of college students who do participate in physical activity only engage in moderate activity 1 to 4 days a week, while 30% engage in vigorous activity on a weekly basis. The main contributor to increased obesity rates is the influx of college students who prefer to engage in sedentary lifestyles. However, there are other factors that can make finding the time to engage in physical activity challenging. College students have multiple obligations that take priority, such as attending class, homework and studying, employment commitments, transportation issues, and family affairs. For some students, day-to-day responsibilities include extending care to children, spouses, or being a caregiver for a loved one. Unfortunately, these obligations can be taxing, which leaves little to no room for physical activity. According to LG, Bland, Melton, and Scheck, evidence reveals age, race, sex, intrinsic and extrinsic factors also play a role in increasing or decreasing physical activity motivation. Males were motivated by intrinsic factors that relate to power, strength, and competition, while females were more motivated by extrinsic factors such as appearance and weight management. Although the Surgeon General recommends that adults engage in 20 minutes of vigorous activity 3 times per week, or 30 minutes of sustained activity of any intensity 5 times a week, most college students are not concerned by the rising health risks associated with sedentary. Move on to adulthood. This leads to concern because 66% of adults in the US are overweight and 33% are obese, which increases the likelihood that the college student will continue their sedentary lifestyle after graduation. Though career goals are established quickly, health goals fall by the wayside, which could possibly contribute to increased health risks. On our next slide, the growth of technology, health educators have been adapting new tools to address health issues and behavior change, such as social media and smartphone apps. Regardless of income, approximately 79% of young adults are likely to own a smartphone and are 24% more likely to use apps to track and manage their health. Research suggests that self-monitoring physical activity through the use of a smartphone application might help in maintaining an active lifestyle. While there are multiple interventions available for increasing physical activity, feedback is the second most used behavior change technique. Winter, Sheets, and King conducted a study to evaluate health-related behavior change techniques and found the most used and most effective were self-monitoring, performance feedback, and goal setting, with the most success being from using a combination of these three interventions versus using them alone. To eliminate the ongoing cycle of this epidemic amongst college students, our last bullet point takes us into our replication of Wack, Crossland, and Miltenberger, who suggest the use of a smartphone application as method for goal setting and performance feedback to address fitness and health-related behavior change. Up next is Ive Ihige, who will share data on our original study.
The original study we chose to replicate is titled Using Goal Setting and Feedback to Increase Weekly Running Distance by Wack, Crossland, and Miltenberger in 2014. The study aimed to evaluate the effectiveness of goal setting and performance feedback to increase running distance in 5 university students. The participants were between the ages of 18 and 28. These students had previously expressed interest in increasing their running distance, and the study used a multiple baseline across participants design, with a changing criterion design for intervention 2. The tools used were the Nike Plus Sport Band and sensor. Distance per running episode were recording using this band and sensor, and recording was defined as a continuous run at a speed of 6.4 kilometers per hour or 4 miles per hour. To assess IOA inter-observer agreement, the researcher, the participants, and 2 independent observers recorded the date and distance per run. The data was taken from both the Nike Sport Band and NikeRunning.com. At the end of the study, a social validity questionnaire was provided to each participant to gain their opinion of the intervention. Baseline data was collected for each participant for 2 to 4 weeks. Each participant wore the Nike Sport Band during each running session to record their distance, but no distance goals were set during the baseline phase. At the end of baseline, the participants entered into intervention 1, in which each participant met with the researcher and set a long-term distance goal, which was a distance the participant wanted to run in a single running episode by the end of the study, and a short-term distance goal, which was a set weekly goal. Each participant was required to run at least 3 times per week and to increase their distance goal each week. The participants had to complete at least 2 of the 3 required runs at or above the criterion level set. If not, then they had to choose between remaining at the same goal or lowering their goal for the next week. Participants had to upload their data onto NikeRunning.com before their weekly feedback meetings with the primary researcher. Due to 3 participants failing to meet their criterion multiple times, Intervention 2 was implemented. During Intervention 2, short-term goals were set weekly instead of them having daily goals. During Intervention 2, there was no minimum number of runs per week, and the running distance had to be at or above the criterion for at least 2 weeks before setting a new goal. Once this criteria was met, the participants were allowed to re-enter Intervention 1. All 5 participants increased their running distance with a goal setting and performance feedback intervention. IOA data had 97%, and during Intervention 1, goals were met on 80% of the opportunities by participant 1, 83.3% of opportunities by participant 2, 33% of opportunities by participant 3, and 0% opportunities by participant 4. Participant 5 had 40% of their opportunities met during Intervention 1. During Intervention 2, goals were met 100% of the opportunities by participant 3, 100% of opportunities by 4, and 82% of opportunities by participant 5. Goal setting procedures in which the criterion levels were set were functioning as an establishing operation that enhanced the reinforcement value of goal achievement. So a goal was set that led to engagement in the behavior, which led to reinforcing consequences of meeting the goal. Not meeting the goal then became an aversive condition that was escaped by engaging in exercising. The purpose of our study was to test the effectiveness of goal setting and feedback intervention on running distance over a 3-week period using the Nike Plus Run Club app. In our research, we hope to answer the question if the intervention will increase running distance as it did in the original study. Andrea will further discuss our replication study.
The methods section, participants and setting. The participants in our project replication were the 5 of us. We all had different exercise activity levels and backgrounds. None of us knew each other before the study, and we all live in different areas of the United States. We collected baseline data for 2 weeks, 3 sessions per week, or 5 running sessions, and the intervention data was collected for a minimum of 3 weeks or 6 running sessions. Participants decided if they were running outdoor or indoor. The materials. During the initial video meeting, we all agreed to use the running app Nike Plus Run Club as the primary data recording method. Each participant had to take screenshots of each running session to share with their IOA partner. Behavior definition. A running episode is defined as a continuous run at a speed faster than a brisk walk, 2.79 miles per hour, or 4.5 kilometers per hour. A non-example will be a brisk walk or any pace lower than 2.75 miles or 4.5 kilometers per hour. Data collection. So data was collected using the Nike Plus Run Club app. The app collected date, pace, and distance while the participant ran. After a running session, participants took a screenshot of their data. Each week of the intervention phase, each participant set a personal record. Individual records of personal distance goals after baseline were maintained throughout the intervention. Design. So a change in criteria design was used for this study. Baseline and treatment phases. Baseline, during this phase, participants tracked each running episode with Nike Plus Run Club app, but personal goals were not set. Baseline data collection lasted 2 weeks, 3 running sessions per week, or 5 running sessions. The intervention phase was goal setting and feedback. Following baseline, each participant set a personal distance goal. Each participant was required to meet the set goal at least 2 out of 3 running sessions per week in order to set a new higher goal for the following week. Visual feedback consisted of sharing screenshots of each running episode with an IOA partner, as well as weekly check-ins with the entire group to discuss progress. All the participants shared their data with each other through a Google Doc. Now Alana will share with us the IOA.
Okay. I apologize. Right now I have a cold. So for inter-observer agreement, we shared screenshots of our runs that included distance, pace, and date with our reliability partner. The reliability partners are as follows: Gianna and Eve, Andrea and Ebony, myself, Alana, and Eve. So we calculated IOA by looking at whether there was an occurrence of the behavior. So was it 4.5 kilometers per hour or higher, the speed that we're running, or was it a non-occurrence? So did we run at a speed lower than 4.5 kilometers per hour? And then we looked at the number of agreements, divided it by the number of trials, and times it by 100 to get the IOA percent. And we got 100% on all of our IOAs. So for treatment integrity, the steps are as follows. Each participant defined a personal goal they aim to run in a single running episode 3 times a week. We increased each running distance each week. We completed at least 2 out of 3 runs at or above the set goal. So in order for our runs to count, these are the criteria that we had to follow. We're going to look at our results starting with table 1. This is a table of our distances ran during baseline and intervention. Note that baseline ended after 5 sessions for all of the participants with the exception of Ebony. And you can see that by, in parentheses, there is our treatment goals. So for example, in Eve's, you can see her first treatment goal is 0.45, and then she ran for that distance, and then 0.55 and 0.6, and so on. So if we go down to the note and we look at everybody's average distance, we can see that they all increase. So my baseline mean was 0.21 kilometers, and my intervention mean was 0.24. Eve's baseline mean was 0.39, and her intervention mean was 0.57. Gianna's baseline mean was 0.19, and her intervention mean was 0.28. And then Andrea's baseline mean was 0.29, and her, sorry, I'm losing my place. Here we go. Her intervention mean was 4.16. And then Ebony, lastly, her baseline mean was 3.92 kilometers, and her intervention mean was 4.1 kilometers. So everyone's baseline mean started lower than their intervention mean, showing that the intervention increased our running distance. Also note that each participant met their goals at least twice a week out of the 3 times that they ran. Okay, so this is figure 1, our changing criterion design graph showing all of the participants, and each phase change line signifies a week change. So the graph has baseline labeled, and then each phase includes that week's goal at the top. The x-axis, or independent variable, is sessions with intervention, and the y-axis, or dependent variable, is running distance in kilometers. Now, if we look at the graphs as a whole, they show that each participant met their goals at least twice per week, and they show an increase in running distance each week. If we look at them individually, we see that some graphs show more variability than others. For example, Eve's running distances gradually increased each week. Her data remained stable throughout the experiment. On the other hand, each of Ebony's phases show variability in the data points. Also, each participant increased their distance based on what they felt was achievable. For example, Gianna increased her distance by 0.10 kilometers each week, and I increased my running distance by 0.5 kilometers each week. But I'm not going to go any more into individual detail because Gianna, coming up next, is going to go over each participant's graph.
Thank you, Alana. So first we're going to go over my graph, and as you could see, like Alana had mentioned, baseline is on the left, and then the phase change line signifies that we started intervention. For the first week, my treatment goal was 0.15, and I was above the criterion level in each 3 of my runs. 0.25 was my next week's goal, and I also was above the criterion level in each 3 of the runs, and same with the following week, which was 0.35 kilometers, and again, I was at or above the criterion level in all 3 of my runs. There is a magnitude change in each of the weeks, so you could see that it goes from a low to moderate level to more of a moderate level to more of a high level. So that shows that the treatment, the intervention was effective for me. Moving on to Alana, she was at or above her treatment goal in all 3 of her weeks as well. In the first week, her treatment goal for 0.2 kilometers, she was at or above in all 3 runs, excuse me. In the following week, with the goal of 0.25 kilometers, she was at the criterion level. And in the last week, she also was at her goals. She met her goals for 2 out of the 3 runs. She was below the criterion level in 1, but that was okay because you only had to meet the goal 2 out of the 3 runs. So the treatment was still successful for Alana. She also had a steady change in magnitude, not as drastic, but it did change each week. With Ebony, she had pretty high goals. So for her first week after baseline, it was 3.5 kilometers. So she met the goal in 2 out of the 3 runs. One of the runs was below, but again, that was okay. Although you see a variation in the data points, that's fine because she still was above her goal by a lot. You could see in 2 of the runs, she was substantially higher than the criterion. The following week, she increased to 3.75 kilometers. And again, there is that variation, but there's a pretty decent gap above the criterion line, and she met the goal 3 out of 3 runs. In her final week, her goal was 4 kilometers. She only met the goal 2 out of the 4 runs, but again, that's okay as long as it's 2 of the runs you're meeting. You are able to consider that intervention successful for that week. With Eve, she has a really nice, steady, accelerating trend from the start of baseline to the end of her treatment, but just breaking it down by each week. With her first week of intervention, she had a treatment goal of 0.45 kilometers. And again, she met the criterion in 2 out of the 2 runs. In the next week, her goal was 0.55 kilometers. And there is a little bit of a slight variability there, but still above the criterion in all 5 of her runs. And then finally, her last week, same thing. All 3 of her runs, she met the criterion, and it was above her goal. And then with Andrea, she also was her treatment goals in all 3 of her weeks. Her first week was 3.3 kilometers. She met the criteria. Was above her set criterion. And in the last week, 4.5 kilometers, same thing. You do see that variation, but she was above it, so she was able to consider that week effective. You also see a change in magnitude from week 1 to week 2 because she increased her goal by 0.6 kilometers, so that little bit of jump. And you also see a change in magnitude from the first baseline to the last week. So she also had an intervention. Then finally, moving on to limitations, reflecting on this, you did note we had quite a few limitations in our study. The first being that we all use different devices. Some of us had iPhones while the others had Androids, and then others used fitness watches. Some of us use Apple Watch, and some of us didn't use a fitness device at all. This could cause an issue because of calibration issues amongst devices, across devices, and we don't foresee this being a problem given we all use the Nike Plus Run Club app, but it is possible that things were calibrated differently. Next, we all ran in different settings. Some of us ran indoor while others ran outdoor. Some people who ran indoor, they ran on a treadmill, and they had noted throughout the study that they felt like the app wasn't registering their runs quite as well as it was if you were running outdoor. So that could have been an issue in data collection. Also, we all ran in different climates and environments. As stated in the beginning of our presentation, we're in various locations across the United States. So that affected as well for us. It's possible that if people weren't running in the cold or, running in the heat, maybe they would have ran better. continue on, we had no follow-up phase. That wasn't the goal of our study, nor was it the goal of the original study. But there's no way to assess if these habits will continue, which we feel is important to assess if the intervention is actually effective. And there's also no way to really know how different these results would be if our grades did not depend on it. Moving on, we didn't have an independent observer / researcher as the original study did. So therefore, our data lacked the extra safeguard for internal validity of having that independent person check our data. We also didn't have the feedback from an unbiased participant, whereas in the original study, they had these weekly check-ins with an independent person. They set their goals with an independent person. So our study lacked that as well. And finally, this could have alleviated having the miscommunication that we had about what constituted as a week if we would have had this independent observer to meet with during these check-ins, because some of us got a little confused and ran Sunday to Monday as a week. Others ran Monday to Sunday as a week. So that provided a little bit of variability in our data, we believe. And then finally, we had time constraints. So we only tested goal setting and feedback on short-term goals of just those distances each week, whereas the original study tested long-term goals as well. So we believe that to be a limitation because our study would have had a lot more information, more valuable information if we were to look at the effects of long-term goals as well.
Okay, so up next, we're gonna do our personal interviews. So the following participants conducted personal interviews amongst one another in relation to motivation, health, elements / environment, and follow-up. I'm gonna read my personal interview first. So, personally, I don't exercise regularly, so when we chose to do a replication study, I was not initially motivated. However, seeing everyone else's runs and enthusiasm, I started to try to push myself. And that doesn't go without saying that there were days that I had a hard day at work and I had planned to run and I just couldn't due to either having been in a hold for a long time or mentally just not being ready to run. As for health, as I mentioned before, I do not regularly exercise, but trying to up my cardio was a personal motivator for me. I really wanted to be able to run a mile straight without stopping or just simply walk up a few flights of stairs without feeling winded. As for elements, I live in Texas and I was running outside. So some days were just too hot and that affected my run, and that motivation was low because I just wanted to be done and get some water. After doing this experiment, I do not intend to run anymore. However, I do plan on finding some form of exercise that I can do in my house to help with cardio. And next we have Ebony.
Thank you, Alana. In my interview, I've referenced that in being a person who exercises 5 to 6 times a week, I was excited that our replication involved physical activity. I was discouraged temporarily because it involved running, which is not part of my exercise regimen. I normally engage in high-intensity interval workouts and strength training. However, my motivation increased for 2 reasons: getting a good grade and possibly incorporating a change to my normal workout routine. As far as my health goes, I am healthy. I enjoy working out because it gives me a release and reduces future health risks, in addition to helping me maintain my desired weight and recommended body mass index, which correlates to the extrinsic factors that I mentioned earlier in reference to women. The elements that I endured during the replication were tolerable because I utilized a treadmill that was located in a room with ample air conditioning. I did not have to endure the elements of rain, cold weather, or extreme heat throughout the replication. Since I started to thoroughly enjoy running once I began baseline. For follow-up, I decided to commit to running 2 out of the 5 to 6 workouts that I complete weekly. Next is eBay.
I personally dislike running. I prefer other forms of exercise like dancing or bike riding. Therefore, I was distraught when our group chose a replication study that involved running. I like to have fun when I exercise, and to me, running is the complete opposite. In the beginning, my sole motivation was my grade in this course. If coursework required me to run, then running is what I'll do. But health-wise, I was very nervous. I was in a severe car accident in February and suffered a back injury, a pelvic injury, and nerve damage that caused temporary loss of sensation on the left side of my body. So I spent majority of the spring and summer learning to walk again, and this assignment was the first time I ran since the accident. After the first few baseline sessions, my motivation increased. I wanted to challenge my body and prove to myself that I have indeed come a long way. And running was physically painful and awkward at first, but with each run, my body felt more comfortable, and it actually ended up being quite therapeutic. So I started running outdoors, but the weather in Chicago is very unpredictable, and that soon became a problem. Then I switched to running on a treadmill at a local fitness center. However, on the treadmill, I found that the Nike app seemed to be less accurate than it was outdoor. But the more I ran on the treadmill, the more the app seemed to recognize the runs. Eventually, I enjoyed the challenge, and I do plan on continuing running beyond this replication project and seeing how my body continues to adjust. Next is Andrea.
Okay, initially my motivation was the grade. I always wanted to incorporate running into my routine, but made all kind of excuses. When we started our replication, I was not physically active at all. During the baseline phase, I found out that I needed to become more active because it was affecting my health. I needed to make changes to have a better quality of life. So this became my main motivation to lower my cholesterol and become a better version of myself. So I decided to run outdoors because I thought it was going to be more enjoyable, and there are some nice trails around my area. But living in Idaho brought some elements like the wind and cold weather. So when trying to run, these factors made it harder for me to meet my distance goals. Towards the end of second week of intervention, I decided to run indoors at the gym. And this was a significant change. I realized that it was easier to meet my goals and I was faster too. I decided to keep running 3 times a week and also set new personal goals. This study changed my physical activity levels and I feel positive changes in my life already. So next is Gianna.
Thank you, Andrea. I echo the sentiments of my partners that I also have low motivation to run. It's something that I've always struggled with to do long distances, so I was a little less than excited when we had agreed on this, but it was something that I also know that it's good for my health, so I had motivation to at least want to do it, to want to better myself. As far as my health goes, I'm not in the best health that I should be for my age, but I'm also not in the worst health, so I'm fortunate there. However, I do have asthma that it's really worsened in the cold, frigid conditions that, like Eve, I'm also in Chicago, so I experienced towards the tail end of this experiment. So it was a little hard for me at times, and as much as I would have loved to increase my goals by a lot more or push myself to run further distances, because it's something that I am capable of doing, I would cough for an hour after my run and need my inhaler. So that was a limitation as far as my health went. And then as for the elements in the environment, like Eve said, we had some pretty blistery days here, so that was rough for me. But as far as my follow-up goes, it's something I'm very glad that we ended up doing this because it made me realize that running is attainable. You just need to break it down into short distances. I've never been able to run a mile without stopping, and now I can pretty easily. And I enjoy running now. I find it to be quite invigorating, and I've ran several times since this intervention stopped, which I'm surprised because it was like pulling teeth to get me to leave the house the first few weeks to do it. It was miserable. And if it wasn't for my group constantly texting feedback and sharing their amazing results, I probably wouldn't have kept doing it. So I'm glad that I did it, and I'm going to stick to running. It was a really good intervention that we all did.
Okay, so in conclusion, we all increased our running distance each week and met our goals at least twice each week. Table 1 showed an increase in average distance run from baseline to the end of intervention. The graphs showed a functional relationship between running distance and the performance feedback and goal-setting intervention. We all had different experiences participating in the study due to our environment and our personal motivations. However, even with different experiences and the before-mentioned limitations, the results of the intervention showed increased running distances.
And here are our references. And we hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.
Happy holidays.